Let's turn today to Matthew's Gospel, chapter 10, and verse 1. In our previous studies, we've been considering how Jesus called his disciples up to the mountain, as we read in Matthew chapter 5, and gave them instructions concerning the life that was to be found in the kingdom of God, the quality of life that he had come to impart to them in Matthew 5, 6, and 7. And then in Matthew chapters 8 and 9, we see a demonstration by Jesus before his disciples in various circumstances and situations of the power that was available in the kingdom to help establish that kingdom. Power to heal the sick, to raise the dead, to cast out demons, and to still storms, power over all the forces of nature, power over all the forces of sickness, power over all the forces of Satan. And at the end of all this time, all this demonstration and this teaching, we read in the concluding paragraph of Matthew chapter 9 that we saw in our last study, that Jesus looked at the multitudes, and they were like sheep without a shepherd. Matthew 9:36, the harvest was plentiful, but the workers, true shepherds, were few. The hirelings were many, the evangelists were many, but the shepherds were few. Therefore Jesus said to his disciples, beseech the Lord of the harvest to send out workers into his harvest. Verse 38. And then, out of all his many disciples, he selected 12. We find there a demonstration of what we were considering last week, that we cannot go out into the Lord's ministry unless he calls us specifically and entrusts a charge to us. There were many who followed the Lord, but not all were apostles. An apostle means a sent one. We read in chapter 10, verse 1, these were the ones who were to fulfill that need that Jesus saw of shepherds. It is in the context of the harvest being few, of the harvest being plentiful, of the shepherds being few, and of prayer to the Lord of the harvest to thrust out workers into his harvest. No doubt Jesus prayed himself that prayer, and the Father did thrust out, through Jesus, 12 apostles who were to be shepherds. And this is the primary ministry of an apostle, to be a shepherd, to raise up those who were thrown down, as we read in verse 36, to encourage those who are distressed, to build the church, the kingdom of God. And having summoned his 12 disciples, he gave them authority. We read in verse 2 that they were called apostles, and an apostle must be one who has authority. Authority over Satan, primarily. He gave them authority over unclean spirits to cast them out, to heal every kind of disease and every kind of sickness. The same phrase used in verse 35 concerning Jesus, every kind of disease and every kind of sickness. He gave that authority which he had to his apostles. If Jesus doesn't give us authority, we have none. No spiritual authority anyway. We cannot have spiritual authority unless the Lord gives it to us. And authority in the realm of the physical, in the realm of the gifts of the Spirit, is something that the Lord gives in his sovereignty to whom he wills. And here we see him giving it to these 12 apostles. Matthew 10, verse 2, the names are listed in verses 2 to 4. Simon, who is called Peter, Andrew, his brother, James, the son of Zebedee, and John, his brother, Philip and Bartholomew, Thomas and Matthew, the tax gatherer, James, the son of Alphaeus and Thaddeus, Simon the Canaanian, or the Zealot, and Judas Iscariot, the one who betrayed him. It's very interesting to see how the Lord brought together Matthew the tax collector and Simon the Zealot. These belonged to two opposite groups among the Jews. Matthew the tax collector would be despised by the other Jews as a servant of the Romans, collecting taxes for the Romans. And Simon belonged to this is not Simon Peter, but Simon the Canaanian, or Simon the Zealot, mentioned in verse 4, belonged to the party called the Zealots, who were determined to oust Rome from Palestine. And here, in the presence of the Lord, they come together. In any other place, Simon would probably have finished Matthew off. But in the presence of the Lord, they could work together. Of course, we see the full fulfillment of this in the New Covenant after the day of Pentecost. And the last one, of course, was Judas Iscariot, the one who betrayed him. When the Lord called him, he was just as sincere and devoted as the other disciples. For we read very clearly in Luke chapter 6, verse 16, that Judas Iscariot became a traitor. He was not a traitor when he started. He became a traitor after a while. And that is what is a warning to all of us, that one can start well like Judas Iscariot and end up to be in such a state where the Lord had to say to him, it is better for him that he was not even born. These 12, Matthew 10, verse 5, Jesus sent out after instructing them, saying, do not go in the way of the Gentiles, and do not enter any city of the Samaritans, but rather go to the lost sheep of the house of Israel. Jesus himself once said to a Canaanite woman in Matthew 15:24, I was sent only to the lost sheep of the house of Israel. Jesus knew that the Father had drawn a circle around his life and his ministry, and he could not go beyond those boundaries that the Father had drawn. The new covenant had not yet been established. It was not yet time for the gospel to go to the ends of the earth. Jesus had come with a ministry primarily to the house of Israel. And this is why he limited himself to the house of Israel. And he told his disciples, stay within these bounds of the house of Israel. Don't go to the Gentiles, and don't go into any city of the Samaritans. That's not valid any longer, because later on in Matthew 28, Jesus said, go and make disciples of all nations. Our commission today as Christians is not found in Matthew chapter 10. It's found in Matthew chapter 28, the last 3 verses, or in the latter part of Mark chapter 16. It would be foolish to go into Matthew chapter 10 and find our commission there. But to the lost sheep of the house of Israel they were to go and preach, saying, the kingdom of heaven is at hand, or has come near. Today, we don't say the kingdom of heaven has come near or is at hand. It is already here in our midst, and we can enter it. Then they could only preach, it's coming, it's near, it's close at hand now. And as an authentication of their message, they were to heal the sick, raise the dead, cleanse the lepers, cast out demons. Freely they had received, freely they were to give. Now, as we said earlier, our commission does not come from Matthew chapter 10, but from Matthew chapter 28, because there are many things listed here in Matthew 10 which do not apply to the preaching of the gospel. For example, in verse 9 he says, do not acquire gold or silver or copper for your money belts. In other words, don't carry a purse with you. Don't carry any money with you. Don't carry a bag for your journey, a knapsack, or even 2 garments. Don't take any clothes with you. Don't take extra sandals. Don't take a staff. For the worker is worthy of his support. Where you go in Israel, the Lord would provide for your need, clothing, food, everything. And into whatever city or village you enter, inquire who is worthy in it. Don't go to any house you feel like. Inquire and abide in the house of one who is worthy. And as you enter the house, give it your greeting. And if the house is worthy, let your greeting of peace come upon it. If it is not worthy, let your greeting of peace return to you. And whoever does not receive you, nor heed your words, as you go out of that house or that city, shake off the dust of your feet. There's a dignity about the servant of God. He's not a beggar. Truly I say to you, it would be more tolerable for the land of Sodom and Gomorrah in the day of judgment than for that city. There's a dignity about the man of God who goes out as Christ's representative. Later on, when Jesus was commissioning his disciples to go out into all the world, there he gave them different instructions. He told them after the Last Supper, he said that, when I sent you without purse or bag or sandals, did you lack anything? Luke 22:35. No, they said nothing. But now he said in Luke 22:36, take your purse along, take a bag. And so the situation changed at the end of those 3.5 years. And we need to understand that this was an instruction given by Jesus for that particular period of time. Later on we read that Paul even supported himself in preaching the gospel, and this is ideally the best way to preach the gospel, supporting oneself and earning one's own income. But at that particular time, Jesus gave them this commission, that they were to trust him for all their needs, not take any extra clothing or food or anything, and God would provide for them in houses that he had prepared in different parts of the nation. And he would take care of his servants, and they were to conduct themselves with a dignity that is befitting a true servant of Christ.